So when you think about managed cloud at Rackspace, when I think about it, I think about data. Data is at the heart of the managed cloud. Many of our customers run into challenges when it comes to managing, handling, scaling the large amounts of data, especially across multiple data stores. It used to be simple. It was just one database. Now it's multiple data stores that you have to manage. Tinder is a wildly successful mobile app that handles billions of ratings a day. And when we say ratings, we mean dating ratings, you know, with people that you might like to have a date with. Tinder's solution to managing all that date information, that data that they're storing, is using ObjectRocket from Rackspace so that they can successfully scale on top of MongoDB. Fresh off the Monday launch of Tinder Plus, their brand new service, please welcome the CTO of Tinder, Ryan Ogle. Ryan.
Me like it right now. I don't know if you get a man or not. If you made plans or not. If God put me in your plans or not.
Hi there. Thanks for the introduction. My name is Ryan Ogle. I am the CTO of Tinder. Just to talk a little bit about kind of, you know, what Tinder is. Tinder at its core is really a social discovery platform. And so what we try to do is to basically connect people in the real world using fun experiences, using the mobile-first idea. Tinder's a little different than a lot of apps in that Tinder actually wants people to get off the app. We want people to go out in the real world and make connections because of the mobile app. And then if that's successful, they'll come back, they'll tell their friends, and other people will come back to the app. And so, yeah, very early on, it's kind of a hard thing for people to understand and for people to really get. We had a lot of kind of internal debate about what Tinder really is. But we don't want to like retain people in the app. We want to get them outside of it. And at the end, if we've done that, if we've made real-world connections, if people are connecting to other people and making that type of connection, then we've done our jobs. So that's kind of, you know, in general what we do. Kind of what we're up to recently. So some of you might have read about Tinder Plus. Tinder Plus is our first venture into the revenue world. It's a subscription-based service that basically gives you kind of two categories. One is a couple of new features, and then the other is some limitations that are restricted from what you might do without the subscription. So the first two features that we launched for Tinder Plus are Rewind and what we call Passport. And Rewind actually is the #1 most requested feature from a long, long time ago. People are always saying, I'm swiping people right or I'm swiping people left, and then, oh shoot, I missed, you know, that person of my dreams or whatever. And so Tinder Plus is answering that question. And then also another highly requested feature, which is Tinder Passport, which allows you to transport yourself to another location, put yourself in that location, connect with people in that place, and then when you go there, you already kind of have seeded the population. You're able to meet the people that they've connected. And then in addition to that, there are two limitations that are being lifted with Tinder Plus, and that is basically no ads. So should we ever do ads in the future, you won't have any of those with Tinder if you're a Tinder Plus subscriber. And then second, you basically are able to swipe with an unlimited, basically. So how did Tinder start? So Tinder came out of an incubator called Hatch Labs, and that was funded by IAC. And the idea of this incubator was that, you know, instead of waiting for all these startups to be, you know, created by, you know, kids in a garage and make these amazing kind of billion-dollar apps, is that IAC wanted to kind of build some of them their own. And so this incubator was in 2 locations. It was in Los Angeles and New York. There were about half a dozen apps that came out of that. In LA, we had 2, and actually Tinder wasn't even one of the original 2. There was a cards reward program application and a how-to app. And I was working on the how-to app, and then they had some technical difficulties with the cards reward program, and there were some kind of issues around what they wanted to do. And so we had an internal hackathon, and the idea came up like, how about social discovery? And so Tinder was born out of that. After a few months, we kind of realized that was the big thing to come out of the incubator, and so everyone was given the option to just join Tinder, and just about everyone did. And then in July, so July was actually when we released the very, very first version. And then it was about 2 to 3 months after that where we really hit the ground and started taking off. And that was kind of when we started forming the actual company and going at it full force. So starting out, we had 3 devs. We had 1 backend person and 2 iOS devs, and that was it. That lasted probably a lot longer than it should have. I think it lasted probably like 6 to 9 months where we were just us 3 and deving on the system. And then once we really started, once we finished the re-architecture and once we started going, then we started hiring people. And so by the end of the first year, we doubled that, so we had about 6 devs on there, and that was a DevOps person and another Android person and I think another iOS person. And just kind of started growing, consistently ever since. And so we had, another 14 devs the second year. Now we're up to 35 devs, and we're aiming for around 75 by the end of 2015. So we haven't really stopped hiring. We're just continuing to grow and finding the right people that embody our culture and our technical fit. And so, but we're growing pretty steadily. Key stats. So today we do about 1.7 billion ratings per day. That translates to about 25 million matches. And we have about 1 million installs a week. And that's growing. I think when I first wrote these slides, it was 1.5 billion ratings per day. And so it's growing at a healthy clip. Drivers for growth. There were kind of a few things I think early on that really helped us grow and become kind of the company and the app that we are today. The very first thing is simplicity. I think that our product guys were so amazing in doing one thing very well, which is find that thing that people want and do that one thing. Don't clutter it with other kind of offerings or other features or functionality. If you do one thing very well, that's going to take you a long way. And I think that's kind of where we're going as a technology society anyway. I think we're seeing more and more kind of very small apps that do one thing very well. And I think that's actually really important if you want to be successful, if you want to grow. I think we're moving away from the one app does everything thing. Also, solving coming up with unique answers to existing problems. I think that some of the stuff that we do today might seem almost obvious and like of course, but it's actually I'm a big believer in the idea that answers to problems are sometimes just simple and elegant. And so like very early on when we were talking about social discovery and meeting other people, we're like, what are the problems with that? What do people struggle with today? And we internally called it like the pursuer-pursuee problem. And that is, if you're a pursuer, if you're going out and you're trying to meet other people, the problem is rejection. The problem is you're putting yourself out there, you're trying to get reciprocation, that's not happening. And if you're the pursuee, the problem is that you're getting bombarded. You're getting people like pinging you or emailing you or poking you or whatever the terminology is. And that just isn't what you want. You kind of want to eliminate both those things. And so there were specific things that we did in the app, like if you guys use Tinder, you know that like you never can see the same person twice. And so that actually, because it sucks to say like, oh yeah, I remember that person, I saw that person before, and I guess they didn't like me because they're still in the app. There's also never a list of people that you've seen before, so you can't go back and say like, oh god, I have like 10,000 people and I only have 5 matches. So we're kind of always future-looking, positive, and that kind of helps solve that pursuer problem. On the pursuee, we use something called, what we call internally the double opt-in, which is 1,000 people might like you in this room right now, but you don't know that until you right swipe someone. And once you right swipe someone, there's a match, there's a conversation, then there's kind of this double opt-in where you're both are talking and you both opted into the system. And so there's a lot of things like that, but it seems almost too simple to be effective, but those little things are kind of the unique answers to existing problems, and I think they've taken us a long way. And then finally, I think brand and promotion were a big part of our growth early on and continue to be to this day. I think that Tinder has a very powerful brand. We built that brand purposely, and the marketing team did an amazing job early on. I think as good as we might say the tech is, the marketing probably was as or maybe even more important than that. They had unique ways to go out to capture what we call like the tipping point and to move certain locations over into like heavily used Tinder areas. And so all of those things were like kind of key drivers for growth and actually continue to be to this day. Talking about that tipping point, for us, there were a couple of things that I think are the difference between tipping and not tipping. And the first one is critical mass. I think that especially for kind of social type applications, if there aren't a lot of people on it, then you kind of just will move away. And there's like this kind of idea of a magic number that once you have some amount, that is kind of self-propelling, and that people will come in and start using the app, and other people will join, and that type of stuff. So there is this idea of critical mass, and for us, once we kind of solve that problem in a specific area, you start to see it tip. And so that's a big part of our strategy. And then also like performance breakthroughs on the technology side. I mean, I remember early on, you build something to, you want to make sure you're building the right thing. And so you're pivoting and you're trying different things and you're seeing what people say about it and if they like it. And you're not thinking about like, the bigger problems of scale and performance and all that. And I think that's the right thing to do. I think you do have to focus on the product first, but there comes a point where it flips and you have to start focusing on the other. And there were very clear like inflection points where like, oh, we just solved this problem and we increased the recommendation speed by 3x, and you just see massive amounts of growth. And so those performance breakthroughs are actually really important for us to move forward. And in the same vein, a lot of those things are kind of the barriers to growth. I mean, I think that to the extent that we can scale is obviously the extent to which we can grow. And again, it's one of those things you just don't think about. You're like, okay, yeah, that's a good problem to have. We'll solve that problem when we get to that. Millions of users, yeah, okay, that's a pipe dream. But again, it becomes a problem very quick. And it's a huge barrier to growth, and one of the things I think that's really important early on, even if you don't solve it early on, just thinking about horizontal scale and how you're going to get there and make sure there's some sort of plan and that you aren't sacrificing that in the long run. It's really important. And then again, performance bottlenecks, again, are a barrier to growth. So to help us with that, we worked with ObjectRocket for scale and for to kind of grow into the app that we are today. MongoDB has been part of our architecture since day one. So from the very first version, we had MongoDB. It wasn't ObjectRocket, but we had kind of our own MongoDB thing, and that's fine. I think one of the great things about Mongo is that like you don't need to like define schemas, you don't need to do a lot of planning. You can just dev and things work, and it's great. But it is one thing to start and another thing to keep it going in a production environment. And so for us, we were looking for someone to help us with that. We didn't have, we knew how to use MongoDB, but using it and maintaining it are two very different things. And so for us, we were looking for ObjectRocket to help us with that production environment, and we didn't want to sacrifice again performance or speed. And so I think the reason why we chose ObjectRocket was that they are in my opinion the best of breed in performance of any Mongo hosted solution. And so it's that was the initial reason why we started with them. So today, architecture-wise, ObjectRocket houses some of our key databases. So they house our matches database, our moments database, and a few other things. And we basically connect to them through AWS. So all of our APIs in AWS. We run Node.js, and we use the kind of native driver for that. And we connect back into ObjectRocket for that. And I think actually one really nice thing also about ObjectRocket, speaking of architecture, is that at some point, we're going to have to, every app has to do this. You're going to move out of the cloud. You're going to have to like get your own data centers, and it's just, there's a point where it becomes just more cost effective. And one nice thing about ObjectRocket is that they offer the on-premise solution as well. And so if we ever get to that point where we want to do that, it's very easy to just basically kind of migrate right into that rather than having to like rethink everything on how our architecture works. So that's a very big advantage. So what's our experience with ObjectRocket? Again, I think that in my opinion, the ObjectRocket really is like the best of breed performance. We tested a lot. We're very careful with kind of our core infrastructure, and they provide the best of breed performance, and it's very, very fast. I think their performance and speed is unmatched. I think it comes down to kind of they have a great mix between, you know, hardware efficiency and price, and so you kind of get that right balance. And they have amazing operations people to help us with those things. I mean, finding good MongoDBAs is really hard. For our scale, you know, how many apps, you know, have used Mongo at the scale that we have? Probably not that many. And so, you know, finding those key people to help drive that forward is tough. And so we leverage them a lot. I don't think good things to say about their operations people. You know, key advantages. Again, sharding and horizontal scale managed for us. Like, we just don't have to worry about that. You know, there's, you know kind of as a dev what sharding is. You know, you got to pick a good shard key. That's important. But there's lots of things you just don't know. There's lots of configuration settings. There's you know, making sure that you have the right number of MongoS and MongoDs, and you have you're doing compaction and doing all these things to keep the thing healthy. And so, you know, a key advantage is we don't have to worry about that. I mean, at our core, we're software devs, and we want to make great software. And so those types of things, you know, it's a big advantage to just not have to worry about that, have someone else do it. Again, it's, you know, we don't have to worry about DBAs, so that's a big advantage. Hardware is unmatched. Don't need to buy our own hardware. We can rest assured that the hardware that is selected is the right performance for us. And in addition to like the kind of production operations stuff that they provide, they also provide great architecture. And so, like, when we have new services, we give them a call and we say, like, hey, we're going to do this, you know, this new feature. Can you walk us through some data modeling stuff? We'd like to work with you on that. And they're great, and they help us with that, and they bring a perspective that helps us kind of think about scale on the right terms. And then finally, I think, you know, they are very proactive rather than reactive. We don't need to like alert them when things go down. A lot of the times things happen and get fixed before we even notice it. And so that's just a huge advantage for us. We don't need to spend a lot of kind of brain power thinking about that. We can think about our app and what we're doing. So lessons learned. You know, again, I think Mongo prototyping is easy, and you just fall into this trap of, yeah, Mongo's great, no problem, it scales, there's auto scale, right? So it'll just work. But serious deployments are very hard, and there's a lot to consider there. There's a lot to build and to maintain, and that was a bug that bit us early on. And I think that we learned the right thing, which is, you know, focus on what you do and let those guys, you know, do what they do. Another key lesson: always consider scale. We have gone through crazy migrations, like stuff that just keeps you up at night. Migrating isn't fun, and so if you at least keep an idea of where you want to go, hopefully you can at least prevent the massive migrations and the kind of re-architectures and all that type of stuff. So although you want to focus in the beginning on the product to make sure that that is the right thing, you know, just make sure that you leave the door open for that growth when it does come. That's something that kind of bit us early on. And again, key lesson: do it together. Again, it goes back to this key thing of we do software development very well. ObjectRocket does their thing very well. We use other third-party providers to do other things, you know, AWS to do our server infrastructure. And so doing it together helps us kind of achieve what we want to achieve and focus on, I think, what we do best and what's our competitive advantages. And so, yeah, I think, you know, overall we're extremely happy and with ObjectRocket, and you know, they're a big part of kind of why we are where we are today. So yeah, thanks to those guys. Appreciate it. That's all that I had.